Good evening, everyone. I am WeatherWorks meteorologist Brad Miller. Joining me tonight is meteorologist Brian Marmo, and we are talking winter weather. Brian, hard to believe it's still hot out there, but Brian is our long-range weather expert here at WeatherWorks, and again, we do have some differences we're already seeing, even though it's late summer versus last year at this time, where we may see a little bit of a different winter pattern setting up, correct?
Yeah, so one of the big things we can look at this early on, of course it's still only the end of August, is sea surface temperatures, and especially out in the Pacific Ocean. So we're kind of looking at two areas right now. One, we have the tropical Pacific, where we see cooler than normal, where we see those blues, the cooler than normal sea surface temperatures. And then also we're looking at this Gulf of Alaska right here, the two, where we see some warmer than average.
Right now, last year this time we were seeing an abundance of above normal temperatures in the Pacific equator region. This year we're seeing a little bit of an opposite. And what does that mean?
Yeah, so last year we had one of the strongest El Niños on record, really one of the dominant driving forces. Mm-hmm. But this year El Niño is now dissipated, and we're now watching the potential transition to a La Nina. So that's really going to be one of the drivers, and El Nino is the warmer phase of ENSO, and La Nina, the one we're potentially watching the transition to, is the cooler phase of ENSO, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation.
And we had El Nino last winter. We saw the result of it. It was a very mild winter for much of the Northeast, even into Mid-Atlantic, into the Midwest as well. Really didn't get cold until January, really, but then we, of course, had the one blizzard. But other than that, it was a pretty mild winter. But this winter may be a little bit different with this La Nina now setting up.
Yeah, so that's going to be one of the things we're going to watch over the next couple of months, is a potential transition into the La Nina phase.
And then as we take a look also, we stay out in the Pacific, and one of the driving factors changing from El Nino to La Nina is what we call the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. What is that exactly?
Yeah, so this is more of where ENSO looks at the tropical Pacific. This is more of the northern Pacific, where we're looking specifically the Gulf of Alaska down the west coast of North America. So there's the PDO has two phases similar to ENSO. There's this warm phase, and this image is representative of that, where we see this warmth over there, and also a cooler phase. We've actually been in the positive phase now, and this is something really we've been watching and talking about for the last couple of years. We've been in the positive phase of the PDO now since January of 2014.
And as we do transition into fall and into winter, we're going to probably see, like you said, the La Nina, but what's uncommon is a positive Pacific Decadal Oscillation combined with a La Nina. You don't see that all that often. So what does that exactly mean? How is that going to kind of play out?
Yeah, so that's going to be one of the things we're watching. Of course, we have the sea surface temperature anomalies, what they are now. Of course, we have to look at what they're going to be during the winter. So here's a CFS modeled of the sea surface temperatures during meteorological winter, and that would be December, January, and February. And we still see these two signals. We see this cooler tongue going out from South America across the tropical Pacific, and then we also still have these warmer anomalies off the west coast of North America.
Right, and these were here last year. The big difference was right here in the Pacific equator region, where we're going to see those below normal sea surface temperatures. And I probably got a little bit ahead of myself there. So again, when we see that positive PDO and a La Nina, again, that's a little bit uncommon, and that's going to trend towards what we may see a La Nina pattern setting up over the U.S. versus what we had last year with the El Nino.
Yeah, and interesting enough, ENSO is one of the driving forces behind the PDO. And as you were saying, a La Nina is generally correlated with a negative PDO. While it's not unprecedented, we have seen it in the past, but it's relatively uncommon to see the positive PDO with the La Nina, especially because we only really have solid records going back to about 1950.
Right, and we, again, look at some of the past winters, sometimes what we call analog years, when we see maybe a trend that's setting up now, and we'll go back and say, well, maybe it looked like this winter, maybe it looked like this winter. And there are some winters that are starting to look a little bit like what we could see, correct? But it may be a little too early still to forecast that.
Yeah, so we have seen this pattern before. One year that comes to mind is 1983-84. It was the winter following the very strong El Nino of 1982-83. And it was kind of this similar transition to this weak La Nina, but you still had that PDO signal along the west coast. So, of course, they're not carbon copies of each other, but it's certainly something we can look back at and say, okay, maybe that's going to give us an idea of what to expect.
Right. And again, we had El Nino last year. We saw the result. trending maybe towards an El Nina this year, and this is something that looks completely different from last winter. So explain what we're talking about here with the jet stream pattern and why we're seeing maybe below normal temperatures for much of the U.S.
Yeah, so last year, most of the eastern half of the country, especially early on, was dominated by upper-level ridging, which allowed this warm air to surge up from the south up into the Midwest and the East Coast. So what we're looking at here on these positive PDO La Nina winters, we see this ridge of high pressure out west, which promotes more dry and warmth, especially in southern California. But then on the eastern part of the country, we see this trough of low pressure, which allows the colder air to funnel down from the Arctic region into the northern plains, the Midwest, and eventually to the East Coast.
Right, and then when we're talking about these below normal temperatures in the Midwest and even into the Northeast and New England, what that would tell me as a meteorologist is that the northern branch may be a little bit stronger than the southern branch, which in turn may mean more clipper systems, more kind of nuisance snows.
Yeah, so last year was, for the East Coast specifically, was dominated by that big storm,
right,
where a lot of locations saw record snowfall.
Blizzard in January, correct.
Exactly, but we didn't see too much other than that.
Right.
It was, as we've said before, it was dominated by more warmth, warmer than average temperatures. So this would be a completely different pattern where it would be colder than normal, but quite active in terms of snow. You'd see a lot of more smaller, medium term.
It doesn't mean that we
events.
can't get the typical coastal system, either a classic nor'easter, because you just got to get the phasing correct. It will happen, I'm sure, once or twice, maybe more. Again, but this pattern would still tell us that it would be more of those clipper systems versus a coastal system. But again, we can't rule anything out this moment, especially in late August.
Certainly, yeah, we're not ruling anything out at this time, but certainly something to keep an eye on.
Right. And again, this is just our first winter outlook. We're going to have several more as we get towards winter itself. Again, there's a few other factors. Explain what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so we're looking at mainly we've been looking at the Pacific Ocean as one of the major drivers, but there are certainly other things to look at.
I noticed the Arctic Oscillation. That sounds a little bit more for the U.S.
Yeah, so the Arctic Oscillation is more of the more in the Atlantic. It actually has a greater correlation with weather during the winter on the East Coast, and so does. That's more of a West Coast. Obviously, it does impact our winter, but the Arctic Oscillation has the strongest correlation for folks on the East Coast in terms of cold and snowy. And that would be the negative phase. So that's it's a little bit too early to speculate on that. That's something we get a better feel for as we get into October and November.
But it is safe to say, though, we're thinking that this upcoming winter will be colder than last winter. Snow-wise, we're still kind of see how things play out and what the trends may look like, but probably not going to be as mild as last winter.
Oh, certainly not, yeah.
All right, and again, that's our first stab at our winter outlook right here at WeatherWorks, and we'll have several more as we get into our fall months. Don't forget, you can follow us on all of our platforms. On social media, of course, you got Facebook, WeatherWorks, Twitter at WeatherWorks, that's our handle. Got Snapchat and Instagram, WeatherWorks LLC. And don't forget, we are here to service you during the winter season as well. Visit our website, weatherworksinc.com, and there's always plenty of stuff on there for you to enjoy. And you can view our storm alert forecasts. If you become a client, our very popular heads up notification, and our nation's leading snow and ice verification service, which is called Certified Snowfall Totals. All this, again, is accessible at our website at weatherworksinc.com, or just call us. And there's always a meteorologist on staff 24 hours a day. Again, we thank you for joining us right here on our first look at the weather and the winter outlook of 2016-2017. Brian, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you back here again some other time.